welcome to another stream. Today I'm with Andres. Andres is the CEO of Toddle, an amazing platform that enable you to build web application. Today we're gonna show you around Toddle, what Toddle is used for, why even bother to use Toddle in the first place, and what you can build with Toddle. In fact, there's gonna be a very robust conversation. There's so many things we're going to talk about today: database design, web application, Toddle, responsive design, why you should use API, and a whole lot more. So if you hang around, you'll be able to ask Andres questions. You'll be able to talk to him about his product, and hopefully, probably try his product and give him feedback. Who knows? You might win something very good today. So thank you so much for hanging around. And I'm just going to introduce the man of the hour. Hey, Andres, how you doing?
Hi, I'm very good, and thank you for having me on, Paul.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So, Toddle launched a couple of days ago. How's it been?
It's been really good. We've seen a ton of excitement about it, which is really good. We've been working on it for quite a while, and it's really good to see how people have received it. We had like an overwhelming amount of signups. We even had some server issues on the day, just to make sure we could handle all the new projects being created at the same time. So, I mean, we choose to see that as a good thing. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
really, really good.
I saw someone on Twitter who built a listing mobile application with Toddle. It was really great. I mean, the UI was really awesome. It was great. I'd
Yeah.
be like, yeah, Andres is up to something. So I have to talk to him about Toddle right here.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the key points of Toddle. One of the things we really want to make sure is that you can build whatever it is you want to build. So if you really care about the design and getting everything just right, we want the tool to enable you to do that, right? It's not about building applications the way we want you to build them. It's about you sort of building whatever it is you have a desire to build.
Yeah, and just talking about freedom, I know a lot of no code tool really put you in a box, really put you in a box as to what you can do, how you cannot do it, because they all come with pre-built template. I've used Story myself a bit, and I see how flexible it is. So what's the entire goal behind making Toggle so flexible that you could literally build anything?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right. A lot of no-code tools are very sort of tied to idea of templates or pre-built components, and that is really great for getting started or building something really quickly, right? I mean, there's no comparison. There's some of these tools out there you can build an application almost in an afternoon, right? A small application, obviously, but still, right? And I think that's incredible. But the trade-off you have there is that if you want to build something bigger and something that you want to maintain for a longer period of time, um, you need that extra freedom, right? Because you need to take your product in whatever directions the users need. Right? You need to be able to, if there's a desire to build a certain kind of feature, you need to be able to add that to your application. Um, and that's where I think some no-code platforms struggle a little bit more. You often get to a point where there's a happy path, and when you're building along that, things are really nice. But once you get to sort of the edges of what the developers have expected you to build in their platform, things suddenly get exponentially more difficult. And that's natural, and I think it's a fair trade-off for quite a lot of apps. That these are still the right trade-off. But we wanted to build something where you didn't have that problem, right? And that sort of comes from our background in more larger software engineering teams, and really working in SaaS companies. And there, you don't really know what you're going to be all the features you're going to be building when you start out, right? As your product hits customers, they're going to give feedback and they're going to have requests for where to go, and some of those requests makes a ton of sense. So it's really hard to even take traditional apps and put them into a box, because they never really fit neatly in real life, right? And that's why we sort of started with, we need you to be able to build almost everything, right? I mean, pretty much everything. We've limited to only being front end. So someone else will handle the back end. That doesn't limit you. That just means you have to go and put together your application stack. But we don't want to limit what you can build on the front end. And the trade-off we make there is that we have a slightly bigger learning curves than some
Yeah,
platforms, right? It can
yeah,
take a little bit longer to get started. I'm working on a YouTube video series right now, taking you through Toddle and learning the basics. And I think the 8th video is coming out soon. So, and there's probably going to be about 10 videos in that series, right? And so there's a little bit more to learn. And also, especially here in the beginning, when we don't have a lot of sort of community build components or more complex components on
yeah.
the platform yet, you need to do a little bit more yourself. But the trade-off is that you can build whatever you want, right? If you want a select component or drop-down component that works just the way you envisioned it, you can build that in Toddle, and you can build it without writing any code.
Yeah, I like the fact that you could almost build anything you want as long as you can think about it with Toddle, and the fact that Toddle is a web first platform, and so you don't have to worry about building mobile applications there, and I think that really gives you an edge. So for all the persons who are coming from the other no code tools like WeWeb, like Bubble, Flutterflow, and a lot of other tools, what are they expected to, what should they have at the back of their head, at the back of their mind or their head when they want to, jump from, make that huge jump? Because I see a lot of persons kind of want to move to another local platform, but because they've spent a lot of time trying to, perfect a tool, like perfect another tool, it's a bit difficult for them to make that jump. So what's that thing? So if I'm coming from another tool, what should I know first before, how should I know, or how do I know that Todo is actually for me, and I should start building there?
Yeah, I think really good question. And first of all, I want to say how great it is that this is a thing people talk about now, right? Because the number one way you can see that no code is taking off is that you're having these conversations. What kind of tool do I need to choose? And suddenly there's a lot of tools on the market, and some of them solve different problems, but some of them solve the same problem just differently, right?
Absolutely.
And that is the sign of a healthy ecosystem. That's a sign of a community that's growing and a market that's growing, right? So first of all, it's really good that we're here and have these conversations. But of course,
Absolutely.
as a user, sometimes it can be hard to figure out what should I choose. I think we're still in a place where you probably have time to try most of the new things that comes out, right? So I think WeWeb is a fantastic new platform as well. They have a lot of the same ideas that Toddle do, that do a lot of the things in a similar way. And I think you should absolutely go and try that as well. And you should try Toddle, and you should try the other ones. You don't have to spend weeks on each platform, but go and try it and see, does this resonate with you, right? And the other thing I would say is that because every platform is a little bit different, it's important to keep an open mind when you start. We've seen the same thing in the last couple of decades in the coding world with different JavaScript frameworks, right? Everyone's a little bit different and brings a new idea to the table. And every time a really good idea comes along, we actually see a little bit of a backlash, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We see a lot of people going, oh, this is terrible. This is the worst idea ever. And then as you go on, people sort of like, okay, it was just actually different, right? So I think for all of these, whether you're trying WeWeb or Toddle or any new application, front end or back end, make sure you start out with an open mind, because sometimes ideas are just different, but can actually work out in your favor, right? And Toddle, I think in many cases, fall a bit into this category, especially if you come from something like Bubble, right? While Toddle and Bubble in many ways can be used for the same things, our approach is quite different. And I think keep that in mind when you try it out, because we sort of built Toddle on some of the same ideas that we've been using in JavaScript frameworks for the last probably almost 2 decades now, right? Some of these ideas about how do we build application that can scale, that can stay
Yeah,
performant, and where
yeah,
you can still reason about them when they're large, right?
absolutely.
And that can be a different mindset. That can be a bit of a change in how you're thinking about building your application. So I think just accept that there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. Don't necessarily jump into a brand new tool with the idea of you're going to build this massive app on day one. take some time and learn the platform. And I think that applies to all these new great no-code tools that's coming out now.
Absolutely. I mean, something like I love that you just talked about. Have it in mind first that you want to build an application that is scalable before picking a tool, because a lot of persons get to pick a tool and it breaks at the end of the day. I think most of the time it's just only take a tweet, somebody else sharing it on Twitter and saying, "Hey, I just get to build this stuff and I started it, but now I can't really, go forward anymore." And then everybody start panicking. So, oh, you mean how many users do you have? It's like I have 1,000 users and my app is just breaking. And the other guy be like, "Hey, I have 8,000 now. I'm gonna have 1,000. I'm gonna have 10,000 users soon. I think it's breaking. Stuff like that." And I really like the fact that you're saying that people can use Toddle to build very scalable application. And top of that, they don't have to worry about anything data. So they just get to display the data on Toddle and they can handle the data somewhere else. So I know we're going to do a showcase, as we go and as we move along. But I want to know which database can a new user, synchronize with Toddle?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we actually get sometimes asked it in a slightly different format, which is what kind of integrations does Toddle have? And the answer to that is you can either argue that we have no integration or we have all of the integrations, depending on your point of view.
Yeah.
So the thing is that on the web, when you're in a browser, your application is running in a browser, right? There's technically only two ways that you can communicate with the server.
Yeah.
There only is two ways you can do that. You can either do it with what's called an HTTP request, sometimes also called a REST API call, right? Or you can use something called WebSockets, which is for instant sort of back and forth message communication, right?
Yeah.
We haven't rolled out our WebSocket support yet. That'll be coming later, but we do support HTTP calls, which is how pretty much all communication on the web is made. And because we do that, and we put a lot of effort into making a really good interface for setting up these API calls, and we'll show that in a little while, right? Well, you can use Toddle with any backend service, right? Because they're all talking the same language, and therefore they work with Toddle. Some of them can be very easy to use. Some people have, like some APIs have REST APIs or some backend service has REST APIs that are really simple to use. Some are less simple. So the trade-off, of course, is that sometimes you are going to be checking out some documentation to try and figure out how to make this particular request.
Yeah.
But it's usually not too hard, right? And most of the backend as a service sort of platforms are really well documented. Makes it very easy for you to get going, right? So we again, this is sort of the mentality. We start with everything, and then we narrow down into making some things simpler, right? So we will probably add support, like specific support for some platforms, which isn't that you can use everything they do now, but we might make it a little bit simpler in the future, right?
I mean, that's
And
great.
some things we can't really simplify much, more than it is today anyway, right?
I'm pretty sure you're going to find a way to simplify it. When you have tons of customers reaching out to you and say, "Hey, I need listing to be like this," I'm pretty sure you're going to find a way to make it super simple. And I think that's super great. So the only thing, if I'm a new Toddle user, the only thing I have to learn how to do is how to make API call and how to design anything I want to do on the front end, and I'm covered. I think that's an awesome situation right there. So I think this is the point where we get to, see the Toddle interface, see, just get a walkthrough around the interface and see exactly how to get started, what we can do, and, how to build it, even if it's a very tiny application right there.
Excellent. Well, I'll see if I can get my mouse online again and share screen. See if I can actually find the right screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think
is that working?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
okay. So
go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is the sort of project dashboard in Toddle. So after you logged in and said go to app, this is where it'll take you. And I have a lot of projects because I've been using Toddle for quite a long time,
Yeah.
including actual Toddle itself. And I think at the end we'll take a little look at
Whoa,
the actual Toddle
that
project.
that's what I like. That that's one thing I like about this. Seeing that you're building Todo on top of Todo, just blow my mind away. I mean, I really really like it. Not a lot of no code platform can actually boast that I'm building my platform on top of my platform, and that's just wide. I really like
No.
that.
Yeah, I think we should dive in, and I'm happy to show you around that project as well. I think let's start out with something maybe a little bit simpler.
Sure, definitely, sure.
So I created a live demo template here, or project we can get started with. And so when you say create a new project, the first thing we ask you to do is create a new branch. And this actually apparently just launched in Bubble as well. So if people are familiar with that, they know a little bit about it. But the basic idea is that the version you're working on is distinct from what anyone on your team might be working on, right?
Yeah.
And maybe when you're starting out, you don't have a big team or anything. But Toddle is built to scale with your organization, right? So by everyone having their own branch, I can make changes without affecting anyone else's version of Toddle they're working on right now.
Yeah.
And these branches merge together. So I'm not going to override something someone else does when I publish my branch. It's very good about understanding what kind of changes have you made and make sure those changes are compatible before you merge, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to create a branch called dev. And you can call them whatever you want. You own your branch, so other people on your team can see it and even jump in, and we'll launch live edit soon, so 2 people can live edit the same branch at the same time.
Yeah.
But most of the time, at least in Toddle, we work asynchronously, right? So I'll work in one branch while some of our teammates work in other branches. So we're going to go to edit for this branch, and that'll open up the Toddle editor. And this one is very basic, right? It's a website that has the word template on it. And we can actually, because everything in Toddle is always live, right? So we can go and check the preview of this branch right away. And if anybody is following, if you go to this URL, dev-live_demo.toddle.site, you'll see the same thing we see, and you can refresh that as we edit today, and you'll see all the changes as they're happening, right?
Yeah.
So today, I think we're going to build a relatively simple app. We want to set up an API and call some data, and then we want to render that data onto our page, right? And I've got a few suggestions of things we could use. I found a cheapshark.com, an API for listing video game prices.
Okay.
So we could do that where you can search for the title of a video game, and then it can show you like what the best price it can find for that is. I've got a deck of cards API where we can draw cards from a deck. Probably we could build something like that. And one of my new, I will say, favorite APIs I've discovered is the Owen Wilson Wow API, where you can get it to show you random clips of Owen Wilson saying wow. Personally, I'm quite a big fan of this one.
Okay.
But I don't know if you have any preference for what we should go for today.
So I think the first one, the card, I think the card is cool because a lot of people are building, listing application mostly in the no-code space. So I think the card will be awesome.
So we're going to do the deck of cards API.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay. Excellent. So the first thing you're doing, and because Toddle is front end only, you're always working. Well, you're not always. You're almost always working with some kind of backend, right? In this case, it's a public API providing us data. It could also be a backend you set up in something like Sano, Superbase, Backfraps, any of these no-code, low-code backends, or even if you're working with a team that coded it, right? It'll work with any backend. But you're always working against the data coming from a backend. So the first thing you generally want to do when designing your applications, you want to figure out what is the data that's available to me, right? And so we're going to have a look at this API here, and they did a really good job of documenting it. So what they're basically saying is that in order to draw a card, what you need to do is first you need to shuffle the cards, and that is done by making a request to this URL. And it's going to return this response that says that looks like that. So let's try and do that. So I'm going to press copy, and I'm going to go into my Toddle application. And then here on the data tab, this is where we define all the different types of data that's available to a page, or APIs and all sorts of different logic we define in here. So we kind of have the visuals here, the elements tree of what is the UI, and then the data is like what we say under the hood. What is all the data that actually powers all this, right? And we're going to create a new API. We're going to call it Shuffle. And we're just going to paste the URL here into the URL, right? And Toddle has this feature called auto fetch. And what it basically means is that whenever this page loads, it's automatically going to fetch the data. And it's also going to be aware if there's any part of the request that can change. And I'll show you a little bit what that means in a second. And then it'll actually automatically refetch that. And again, I'll show you that when we make the second request. But for now, the data, we can see the data that's coming back here. Toddle has passed it. And it says, well, success true, deck ID, and then a bunch of numbers that it's an identifier. Remaining cards, 52. That kind of makes sense. And then the fact that it's shuffled, right? And all this data we see here matches exactly what we saw here, right? Because that's what the API is sending us back. So Toddle has just passed that JSON data here and made it a little bit easier to read over here, right?
This is a very simplified way of showing the API response compared to what we see on some other tools, where you get to return an unformatted JSON object. But I think this is super awesome, because I mean, this is really no code, because you're seeing, you know, everything. You're seeing the response, very neat, you know, just super awesome.
Yeah. So our philosophy here is that it's important to understand what JSON is, because it's generally the language that APIs speak, right? So you are going to send JSON to a server, you're going to receive JSON for the server, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to work with the syntax all the time, right? So we can make it a little bit nicer to work with and still make sure people understand. And we still make a big deal out of teaching people that we're sending this as JSON, so that when you go and work with a backend team, when you go work with another platform, we're all speaking the same language, right? We don't have to learn a new concept every single time, because on the web, that format is called JSON, right? We just display it a little bit nicer, but it's still the same data underneath, right?
Yeah, sure.
But so the way this API works is that it'll give us a deck ID right here. And then it says, if you want to draw a card, we're going to do that, and we're going to provide it with this deck ID, right? So we need to call this API, but then we need to put the deck ID in the middle of this URL here, right? And this is one of the places where the Toddle APIs can be really nice to use. So we created the first API, that's shuffle. And then after we shuffle, we want to draw a card, right? So we're going to create a new API called draw. And we're just going to paste this in here. And then here, instead of leaving this here, we're going to take it out, and then we're going to add a path segment down here. So adding a segment down here does, and I think the second one was draw, right? And then this, if we take we could just copy the API. Let's see if we can just, so we can put any API in here, right? And we end up with the URL that matches the same thing as before. So it adds this path onto the end of the URI.
Yeah.
You add it up here, right? And in this case, of course, I just added some random letters, and it says that deck ID does not exist. That's kind of fair, because obviously I just made that up. So we want to put the deck ID from the first response into this second response, right? So we're making two responses in serial. We're going to first shuffle a deck. Then when it's shuffled, we're going to say, let's go and draw a card, right? And the way we can do that is we can define this little path segment with a formula. So this little FX button, you'll see everywhere in Toddle, right? And whenever there's an FX button here, or a formula button, as we say, that means you can define something using a formula.
Yeah.
That means you can define it to be dynamic. So if we click this, right now it just says it has the value, right? But we can change this little node. And then here we can see we've got access to some different kind of data. We've got some APIs. We can create some data structures, and we can do a lot of logic operations down here. And what we want to do is we want to grab that deck ID out from our first API request, right? And that is called the shuffle. Then we've got the data, because that's our successful response coming back that puts it in data. And then we have this deck ID right there, right? And that was the ID we got back. And you can see it's actually changed, because as we changed this, it made another request to refetch the data. But this is the new deck ID that we need, right? And I think the next one was, this seemed correct. Let's just try and see. Did we change something here? Was it draw? Yeah, okay. It just needed a refresh. So now that we provided this deck ID, we actually get a card out now, right? Does this make sense so far?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we used one API call to the server to shuffle a deck and get this ID back. And then we use that ID inside this path to actually refetch a new, to refetch, like to get a card in this case, to draw a card, right? And now here on the response, again, if we're reading through this, we can see it says success again. That seems to be a thing that this API likes doing. It'll also give us the deck ID back that we're using.
Yeah.
And then it has this list of cards, right? With a code, an image, and a value and a suit, right? And it also gives us the number of cards remaining, right? So now let's go and just render this card out to our API so we can see what we've actually built, right?
Yeah, this is the exciting part.
Sorry?
I said this is the exciting part of it.
Yes, yes. There's a certain thing that once you can see it, it feels better, right? Like that's when it starts getting fun.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to delete what we have here, right? And I want to add in a, I think we'll add in a main. It's always good to have a main section where all your content can be, right? That sort of tells the browser or Google or anything crawling that the main content of this application or this website is inside this main section.
Yeah.
And then actually we get a list of cards back because you have an option of drawing more than one card, right? And we might play around with that a little bit. So I'll add a div inside this. And then in here, we'll add an image. And we'll add a heading, let's say heading 2, and then we'll just add, it's always good to have a heading 1. That says cards, right? This image, we're going to leave it, we can style it a little bit later. I really like getting the data in as soon as possible, and then actually building UI with the fully formed app, right? Because then you don't hit these edge cases later when the real data comes, right? So if we look at our draw API here, again, we can see this cards data is actually an array. We can see because the keys here are 0, 1, 2, 3, and there's only one at the moment, right? But that's because you can actually choose to, if we add a query parameter, we can actually say count, I think we could say 2. Was that right? Yeah. And then you can draw 2 cards, right? That was part of the, you can see that as part of the API here. You can add count 2. And down here, we don't have to write the whole URL out. We can just add this param here saying count 2, right? We only want 1 for now. We can add 2 later. But that's why we have this. We'll just kill that one. Deck ID does not exist. Let's have a look. I think our shuffling is confusing this. I think the shuffling is confusing this API a little bit. What is happening here? I think maybe our deck ID goes away when we try and refetch it. So let's see if that worked. That worked. Okay, good old refresh. So we've got our cards here, and we want to render this div, right? We want to show this for every single card in our API, right?
Yeah.
So if we're 1 card, we're going to show 1 of them. If we have 2 cards, we're going to show 2, and so forth, right? And the way we can do that in Toddle, so we basically want to dynamically decide how many copies of this we want to have, right? And in Toddle, that's called repeating an element. So if we click this element and then go into attributes, we can click repeat here. And then we need to sort of provide it with an array of items to repeat over. And we have that inside our drawer, right? So we're going to pick data and then cards. And then right now we only have one in it, and that's fine. We're going to leave it there. And now we can't see anything because it's still showing only one example of it, right? But the interesting thing about repeating is that now inside, when we're inside this, so the image and H2 are inside this div, right? Inside, we now have access to something called a repeat item. So right here, I went to the image and then changed its source attribute, which is where do I fetch the URL for that image, right? And now I have access to this repeat item. So this is kind of different than if you saw when we used the formulator before, we only have access to these two APIs. But because I'm inside something repeating, I now have access to the repeat item. And this item is going to be different for every iteration of that repeat. So if for the third item in the list, it's going to show different data than the first one, right? And for this item, I can pick out the image as a source, and then I'll use that source as this images for this image, right? And I can kind of for this one, I can say heading 2 and can change the text to item and then value. And let's just go and add a few more text elements. So we're going to change. So I can just add more text elements instead of trying to build a complex string in a formula. That's also possible, but sometimes the easiest way is just to add multiple of these text elements after each other and then do of. And then here we can change this formula to suit. And this is 8 of hearts, right? Okay. Does that make sense so far?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Andreas, this is lovely.
Excellent. And then we can play around a little bit with the styling, align things a little bit, maybe add some margin to make it a bit more right. So that's sort of a way of showing like how we can, in this case, normally you rarely have these sequential API calls where you first shuffle and then draw. That's not very common. It's kind of just specific to this deck API, right? But you can see how we use this draw API to get the data out and then actually generate our UI very dynamically there, right? But we never had to go and say, like, insert a new item for every whatever, as you often would do in the code world, right? Because building this UI, we can just say, well, render this for each of these, right? And then just make sure that the image URL is always equal to that item's image source, right? And now if we go and to, for example, to our draw API and we add back our count, and let's say 5, maybe we're playing poker. And now we can see here, now we're getting 5 suits out, right? And it's doing the same thing for each card.
And this is just you increasing the count, the number of counts for this particular cards, right?
Yeah. So this is sort of a core part of Toddle and how Toddle works, is that when you define the UI here, right? When you're designing, you're sort of saying, how should the data I have now, how should that be expressed as UI, right? And because you're using formulas here, right? When the data in the formulas change, it automatically updates the UI. So because we added this count to the draw item here, right? It's going to refetch the data. And then it's going to say, well, now there was not 1 card in my cards list, right? Now in him, we're repeating here. It's got 5 cards. So it's going to repeat this item 5 times. And because inside of image in the source, we were using this repeat item, then for every single card, that repeat item's image value is going to be different. And they're going to match these, as you see, we have them in here, right? Here we have all the cards in our API, and the first one is going to have an image here, the 4 of hearts, and the second one's going to have a different image, right? So for each repeat item, for each one of these that repeats over, it's going to end up accessing a different image.
Yeah, definitely.
And this means that when you're working with data and APIs, it's very easy to manage the sort of dynamic aspect, right? Where if you had to, every time something changed, you had to go in and say, how should I update everything? That would be very cumbersome, right? That's sort of a lot of extra code, if you will, or effort, if you will, to make that happen, right? Where
Yeah.
when we have this sort of template style where we're saying, well, this is how you render this UI given any kind of data, it'll automatically handle all the updates when the data change. And an interesting example of this is actually, like, let's say we're going to change the draw and we'll change that back to 1.
Yeah.
It somehow does not like that with the deck API. I'm not sure why. It seems to be resetting this. Anyway, not happy. As far as I can tell, this is an API thing, though. So I don't think there's too much we can do about it in Toddle. But
I want to ask a question before you move ahead.
Yeah,
How does
absolutely.
Toddle deal with complex formulas? So there are some application that requires users to use some very complex formulas, like maybe find the first card, the second card. For example, if I'm returning something, like if I'm building like a banking application or a referral system where things have to be a bit complex, how does Total handle such application?
Yeah. So I think I can answer a little bit now, but I think it's probably best answered when we take a look at Toddle, the application itself,
Yeah.
because that is probably one of the most complex applications I've ever built, I think. So and I've been building a fair lot. I've been coding for a while, right? But I think that probably still takes the price. And it has a lot of complicated logic in it because of the nature of what we're building. And Toddle handles it really well. And we have built a lot of different ways for you to sort of navigate that. So for example, let's still go and let's say this diamonds, we didn't quite like that it was uppercase, right? So you can start by doing simple things as saying, I would like you to lowercase that. And then it's going to change that string to lowercase. And we have this sort of formula editor here. And we can add these nodes, right? And we can make this formula more or less complex depending on what we need. So I talked about how, for example, the 7 of diamonds, it was easier just to add it as 3 text nodes. And it is, but we don't have to do that. We can also use a formula. So I can go into 1 text node.
Yeah.
And then I can say, well, I'm going to start with item value. Then I'm going to concatenate that. And then the string of, and then I'm going to add the item. I think we said suit and then lowercase. So you can do the same thing by putting together a formula. And what this does is this concatenate is basically saying, give me a list of arguments that are strings, and then I'm going to put them all together into 1 string, right? Like you can see it does here.
Yeah, I think
and then the item suit, the lowercase, is just changing that to lowercase. So you can see how you can build these formulas up to be more and more complex. And I'll show you some examples of some more complex ones as we get into the Toddle editor in a little while, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is getting a really no code. You're making sure that people don't have to write custom functions. I mean, some platform that I built with myself for maybe doing like lowercase, uppercase, concatenating, you almost have to write simple custom function for those, code expressions for those kind. And so if you're not somebody who has coded before, you have to run all the way to what's this place called where you go to find formula? Stack Overflow.
ChatGPT. Oh, Stack Overflow.
ChatGPT. So I was going to say Stack Overflow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Run there and you get something for yourself and you can't paste it. If it doesn't work, you have to go back again, because you have to write all this yourself. And it's super exciting to see that Toddle is handling all those things for you without you really doing all the stuff yourself.
And I think so. So part of our philosophy here is that you can do almost anything in no code, and almost is more of a right now thing. Right? Eventually, I don't think there'll be anything you won't be able to do in Toddle that you can do in the browser, but the browser has a lot of functionality, right? and we probably can't support all of it. I don't think we would have the time to do that. So what we've done instead is make sure that any one of these nodes here, right, like concatenate, this is a function that I wrote and uploaded to Toddle. And I wrote it in JavaScript, right? So is lowercase. Now, in this case, it's part of our standard library that ships with every single, so that's available to every Toddle application, right? But soon you'll be able to, if you want to extend Toddle functionality, you'll be able to go and create one of these and then upload that to the platform. So if you want to do something that's like somewhat beyond what Toddle can do, like let's say you need to like create a cryptographic ID or whatever it is you need to do that's really complex and sort of well outside of the scope of what we support yet, you'll be able to upload that to your project, and then you can just use that in here, right? It'll show up in here in your functions, and you can use that any way you want, right? The other thing we do is we also allow you to like extract formulas. So as this becomes more complicated, right, you can imagine there's a reason why you can zoom out a lot here. Let me just say it that way. They can get pretty big, right? So sometimes you might want to simplify that. So you can, for example, go here and you can grab like that. Now I'm just pressing Command C to copy it, and I can go and actually extract that into a formula right here called name of card. And then I can add some inputs, let's say value 5, and I'll add another one called suit. Oops, right, and we'll call it diamonds. And again, these are just test values that I use while developing the formula, but these are sort of inputs, and I'll show you how to use this in a second. And then here I can just paste this in, and then I'm just going to change this to suit and this to value. So I basically took the same formula that I used before, but I moved it into component context, and says here 2 inputs that you're going to get. You're going to get a value and a suit, and then go and perform this operation. So now if I go into and you can see it's around here. Now if I go in here, I can actually use that instead. So I can say, I want to say name of card, and that should be value, and that should be suit. And it'll run the same thing. So you can on the fly define your own formulas in Toddle, if you're going to reuse the same thing a lot of time. And this is a really good way, sort of as your application, as your formula, some of the complex ones starts to maybe explode a little bit because they're very big. If you're doing something really complex, most of the time it's not a problem at all. But if you're building like a no-code editor in your no-code editor, right? Sometimes it gets a little bit hairy. So being able to like create these sort of names and these sort of your own formulas inside is a really good way to sort of manage that complexity, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I like this, that you can split everything. I mean, it's almost like UI UX design, where you build everything like an atom, and then you begin to add everything together. You know, I like the fact that with Toddle, everything can become like a tiny piece. You know, even your formulas, your values, everything can become like a tiny piece, and then you can then decide to, you know, keep adding to it and keep adding to it. I mean, you're just blowing my mind as to how awesome stuff that you can build with Toddle. I mean, considering the fact that you can build another no-code platform on top of this no-code platform, really just blew my mind, because I've seen a lot of people in the SaaS game who wants to build content management application, content management no-code too, website design no-code too. You know, it's just super awesome. I'm pretty sure it's something I'm going to try myself, and I'll show you when I'm done.
That sounds awesome. I would love to say it. Yeah, I mean, there really is no limit as what you can build. There are a few things that Toddle isn't very good at, right? So let's say you want to build something with 3D graphics in it for like on a canvas or something, right? Like Toddle doesn't handle 3D graphics at all, but something like Spline.design does, and it does incredibly well. And you can plop that inside a Toddle application. So you can combine the two together. So even if like the actual rendering of whatever 3D thing you're building, Toddle is not handling, you can absolutely integrate the two. And I think we already shared a few examples of that on Twitter and different things you can do, right? So yeah, the idea is that you kind of need to know, like you're the one who's in charge of where your application needs to go and what you need to build, and we just have to provide the tools to let you do that, right?
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, that is great.
I want to show one more thing for this, if we have a second. I want to show one more thing for this app, because I think there's a quite an interesting phenomenon here we can use, which is, so we have now this API shuffle and this API draw, right? And the draw sort of happens after the shuffle, where you draw a card. But we could actually add here a button, and let's call that shuffle.
Yeah,
Right.
it's gonna call the API over and over again.
Yeah, I think for now we'll do it when we click it, right? So I'm gonna add an event to this button, and Toddle has a lot of events, and it can look a little bit intimidating. It doesn't have to be. You generally only use a few of them, but
Absolutely. The drag
but
and
you
drop.
might end up needing some of them, right? That's why they're here, right? So we're just gonna use the click event. This is the most common one, right?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the
And
drag
what
and
this
drop.
says is that when I click, oh, sorry.
I said I'm just looking at the drag and drop event, and I'm thinking of people who want to build stuff like Trello. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And we use that as well in Toddle. I'll show you in a second, right?
I mean, this is really no limits, Andreas. This is really no limits. Awesome.
Yeah, because we don't know what you're going to build, but we're really looking forward to seeing it, right? But so here, when we click the button, this is our workflow editor, and it's basically whenever event happens, it's going to trigger a workflow. And if you use different kind of no-code tools, that might feel quite familiar, hopefully, right? But it's essentially saying a list of actions that Toddle should perform when this click event happens on the button, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is awesome.
And in this case, one of the options is to call the API shuffle. And because every time we call this API, it'll reshuffle the deck and return a new ID, it should give us a new random card, right? So we're just going to call that API when we click the event. And then we're going to go back here, and we're going to go into test mode here and give that a shot. And then it changes it to Queens of Clubs.
This is super awesome. Can you go back? Can you go back? I want to see how you're gonna deal with conditionals. Like if however you put something like a conditional, if it's if the result from the draw is 5 downwards, you want it to be something. If it's gonna be 5 upwards, you want it to be something.
Yeah, we could absolutely do that. The thing is that this is not actually where we get the result from the draw, right? Because we're only calling shuffle. So the result from the draw, what this does when we click it, it just calls shuffle, but it doesn't actually call draw. But we only told it to call shuffle. The reason why it also draws a card is because this API draw is set to auto fetch, and we're using this ID inside the URL, right? And what Toddle detects is that this ID just changed, and if part of my URL changed, then I need to go and refetch that data from the server.
Yeah.
So it automatically calls this API because one of its dependencies changed, right?
Yeah, and this is super awesome. And this just makes sure that you don't do so much of data query, like, because you don't want to change. You're not changing everything. You're just changing a tiny part of that API call, and so you're not fetching the entire everything all over again, and that really makes sense. So it saves a lot of money,
Yeah, it saves a lot of time. In the programming world, we often call it declarative programming. The idea of setting up the relationships, of saying this thing is based on this thing, and therefore when that thing change, the other thing also, right? The other thing should also change. And Toddle is very much built around this idea. It's the same reason why the UI automatically updates when you change the data, right? It's because it's always aware of what the data is, and when the data changes, those changes follow through what you set up, right? If you've not actually ever programmed, this is probably just how you expect things to work. So therefore, there's not anything new to learn. But for programmers and people coming from a code world, this can actually be quite different, right?
Yeah, it could, because it could because lots of people are used to fetching, everything when one particular thing changes, and this you're just fetching a subset of it. when one thing changes, and this is just a whole new, a whole new feeling.
Absolutely. Good. So we do have conditionals. We call it switch in this case. And that's just because it's visually easier to navigate having multiple conditions next to each other. But so you can go here and say, if, in this case, if my draw data, and then what do we say, cards, let's say if the first card is value, and then if we say greater than 5, then we have to convert it to number, and then say greater than, oops, no, that was wrong. There we go. All right. So now it's 5. Apparently we randomly draw 5, but if it's greater than 5, we can actually give this a name, which just makes it easier to understand from the outside. So value greater than, what was value 5? And the benefit of doing this is now you can see what the condition is out here, right? So you can label it. And then you can say, in that case, I want to go to URL example, let's say google.com. And then eventually it'll keep drawing. And if it eventually is bigger than 5, it's going to navigate the whole page to google.com. Or whatever it is you want to do here, right? And you can add multiple of these conditionals. So that can be, if not that, then it'll check this one, and then it'll check this one, and then finally it'll go to the else condition, right?
Yeah, this is almost looking like
you can build up this whole tree as complicated or simple as it needs to be for your application.
Yeah, I mean, this is Andreas is almost looking like program. This is like writing JavaScript, but just doing it on the screen without really writing it.
Yeah, we actually already had that happen. We can see we got navigated to example.com. So there we go. Yeah. So I think that's sort of a simple. We've also have gone through a lot, right, in a short time.
Yeah, we have. So
obviously,
you want
Toddle can do a lot more than this, but I think this is a pretty good sort of example of how you can get started and what it can do, right?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Andreas. I mean, such a very thoughtful section. I'm pretty sure, viewers will watch this video, especially those persons who want to get started with building very, very scalable application. And I, for one, I like the formula part of it. I really don't like writing formulas for everything. And I like the formula part of it where I can, do complex math just by looking at the screen, and I can split and, turning things into tiny components and then adding them up to make something super large, something that I like, that Toddle does. But you want to show us around, I think we have like 5 minutes. You want to show us around Toddle itself?
Yeah. So let's just go back to projects. Yeah, so I'm just gonna, and so you can see we've got a lot of branches going on at the same time, created by different people. I even have more than one going at the same time, because sometimes you're working on something, but you want to try something out. And so being able to just pull a whole fresh version of your project out that you can work with. And if it turns out that it was a terrible idea, you can just delete the branch and we'll just throw it away, right? So it's just a nice, being able to work in parallel is really useful. Let's create a demo branch and edit that. And for some reason, we always start on our for page on this project. But so here, for example, this is our homepage, right? And you can see this is what you see when you get to toddle.dev, right? We've got the different section. And what we've done here is we've broken this down into components. So Toddle lets you build components, and they work like pages, but you can nest them inside pages or inside other components. And it's sort of a way of not having to deal with everything your page does in one view, right? It's sort of nice to say, can I just look at the header without needing to navigate through the code of all the other parts, right? And you can just, for example, it's navigation. We can just go to that navigation component, and we see just what's inside here, and we can edit that. And then we can go back and fix the rest of it. So that's why you're seeing these purple elements out here, right? These are components that we've broken the application into. And you can see we can just sort of either we can keep extending the size, or we can also go into test mode and just scroll through, and you can see our whole web page in here, right? And so the website is all built in Toddle. We even have a there we go. Just scroll past my own viewpoint there. We even have this, which is our demo editor, and this is actually a copy of the whole Toddle editor. A sort of very simplified shadow copy of the whole Toddle editor that's on our website. And you can kind of play around with this if you want. So if we want to go and change Allison, we can actually go and say, I want to change that text color to pink. So you can kind of go and play around it a little bit on our website, just as a way to sort of understand what we're doing, right? But of course, this project is not just our website, right? This is the whole Toddle project. So this left panel out here, we have here called left panel. And so we actually have that every single part of the UI. You've seen everything we've shown today, everything from the style panel, the left panel, everything is built in Toddle, right? It's all built the same way. You can see the whole editor here, right? Which can sometimes get a little bit confusing when you're working on multiple levels of the same application at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, every part of our editor, every part of our website, our blog, our documentation, all of it is built in Toddle. Yeah. And we're not, I mean, Toddle lets you incorporate, for example, you can throw in a web component if you have something that you have coded as a web component, which is a web spec that lets you build components, kind of like Toddle components, but are reusable across all kinds of websites. You can incorporate them into Toddle, right? So you can extend Toddle with coded functionality, but we actually haven't really done that in Toddle because we pretty much consistently found that it was easier to build things in Toddle than coded, even in some of the more complex cases, right?
This is really beautiful, you know, especially the fact that I haven't really seen any no-code tool give you a chance to experiment with the no-code tool directly on the dashboard without authentication or without logging in or, you know, or doing anything. Most of the time, lots of persons just slap in a video over there and say, hey, this is the way it works, you know, a very short video, and they're just showing you somebody moving the mouse around the place. But yours, you can easily, you know, you can even have the feeling of you building the application on Toddle before you actually sign up, and that just really makes a whole lot of sense. And it's a great job considering the fact that you're building all of these things on Toddle. I mean, you using your platform yourself before every other person even get to use the platform, and it just makes a lot of sense for me.
I think, to be fair, I think one of the reasons why you wouldn't see this from many other no-code platforms, and it kind of came to us as a kind of a sporadic idea, right, of saying, what could we actually throw the editor on the website, right? Would that work? And I think, I mean, there's a few things that has to align for that to even be feasible, right? You would have to build your application in something very fast, right? So Toddle is not built on any of modern JavaScript framework. And the main reason for that is actually they're all quite heavy and they all take quite a long time to load. So ideally, you don't want that on your landing page, because it gets indexed by Google, and Google cares a lot about it being performant, right? So it has to be fast. You have to load it really fast. So if you don't have a way to sort of do that really efficiently for landing page, it's going to hurt your SEO optimization. It's going to hurt the performance of the user, right? And we that was all things that we thought a lot about when designing Toddle, that we wanted you to be able to build applications that are performant. You can do anything you want, but we should make sure it's fast, and it should be fast to load, and it should be server rendered. So that visual you first get is everything just done. Like, you see quite a lot of things where you actually load and you will have like a blank screen for a little while before the application comes in. And that's usually because everything's actually rendered just after you load all the code, right? And we didn't want that. We wanted to be able to hit those state-of-the-art performance metrics while letting you build very complex applications. And as a nice side effect, that also allows us to do something like putting a demo version of our editor on the web page, right?
That's really awesome. I mean, I'm just saying like you on your team, you guys are killing this, and I'm pretty sure that tons of people are going to watch this video and they're going to learn how to get started with Toddle. And I'm gonna put your link that I'm gonna put your probably your Twitter handle in the description, or maybe your support email in the description,
Mhm.
so that other persons can reach out if they want to learn a whole lot. I personally, I'm gonna be experimenting a whole lot with Toddle, so I can make very informed decision as to what I want to do, because I also want to build a learning management platform, and I pretty sure it needs something that is really really flexible for me, and something that I can easily not talk about the database, because I'm not just get database out there, maybe on Airtable or some other platform, and I just get to host the video and everything on that platform. Andres, I want to say a big thank you to you for joining me. Thank you for staying like 1 whole hour of your time, and talking about your product, talking about your platform, and how the juicy things that people can actually get here. I want to say a big thank you, and also I want to say big congratulations on your launch, and wish you super 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 success in with Toddle. I should keep going month after month, but this is not going to be the only time that I'm going to call on you. I'm pretty sure you're going to make tons of improvement on Toddle, and we'll have to talk about it. And for the podcast, I'm still going to call you up, because I think that Todo is going to help a lot of people build some very great SaaS, because we're entering into a new space right now where people are building multi-platform SaaS, and I think Todo is going to have a very strong market right there. And I'm still going to call you up to come share how people can build super SaaS application with Todo. Andres, thank you so much for joining. Really, really appreciate you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And yeah, you can go and try Toddle out now. We're in open beta, so just go to our website toddle.dev and sign up and try it, and join our Discord. Let us know what you think on Discord, Twitter, wherever you can find us. We'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, the link to Todo. Meanwhile, the link to Todo, guys, is gonna be in the description, so you can always find it. If there's, I'm not sure, people don't pay yet, right? There's no, it's free, right?
Nope. No, and
See,
we
see.
will always have a free version that you can experiment with and try out. We're not going to charge you for trying Toddle and building side projects, and they're also going to be live. They're just going to be live on a toddle.site domain. So
Awesome,
once you want to add domains, etc., to it, it's going to be a paid feature. But if you want to build a little side project, something fun, we'll host it for you for free. So
awesome.
go and build something. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much, Andres. So I'm pretty sure I'm gonna share this on my mailing list. If there's a coupon, I'm gonna find a way to get it from Andres and give it to you, so you can actually use it if you want to use the paid version. Andres, thank you very much once again, guys. Thank you for stopping by. For those persons who are watching it in the future, click on the link below to sign up for Todo. It's free of charge. You're not paying a dime. But trust me, you're going to build super scalable application. I'm going to be using it, and I'm going to be shooting some videos about it, and you'll definitely hear from me. I'm going to tell you the whole truth. Todo is good. I'm going to tell you it's terrible. I'm also going to tell you. But from what I've seen today, Todo is an awesome place for you to build scalable mobile applications where you don't have to worry about database. You just worry about the front end. Thank you, guys. I'll see you next Friday, same time, 2 p.m., where we get to learn about. I'm going to interview someone else who's going to come tell you about probably SaaS, no code 2, or anything else. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.